This is a very different kind of Peugeot 5008, but one we think style-conscious family buyers may rather like. There's space for 7 and room to express yourself in a Gallic package that's distinctively different.
Why would you buy a 7-seat MPV when you could have a 7-seat SUV? Well, that's the question Peugeot wants to ask you here with this car, their second generation 5008. It's a question the brand sat down and asked itself before creating this car. The first generation 5008, launched back in 2010, was a mid-sized MPV with 3 seating rows and a moderately successful one for the French maker. When the time came for its replacement, we expected a sleeker version of the same people-carrying formula. Instead, what we got at this Mark II model 5008's launch in 2017 was this. MPV had become SUV. Peugeot had got in tune with the times, and family buyers had gained a more avant-garde option in the growing market for larger, mid-sized crossovers with 3 rows of seats. Peugeot claims that this model's switch of genres has no downsides. Well, we'll see. According to the brand, this second generation 5008 is just as versatile as its people-carrying predecessor. It's certainly significantly longer and taller than that old car, but you get all its practicality without the stultifying dullness that tends to taint the MPV segment. So, what's not to like? It's worth pointing out that this change of approach wasn't all driven by a desire to suit changing customer preferences. Creating this 5008 as a completely new MPV from scratch would have been a lot more expensive for Peugeot than what they've actually ended up doing here, namely developing a slightly longer and slightly larger version of their existing 3008 5-seat mid-sized SUV. The two cars share virtually all the same engineering, and that includes a stiff, sophisticated EMP2 chassis, although that platform has been extended in this case by 19 centimetres to provide for a lengthy 2.84 metre wheelbase. And the Gallic maker reckons that will make this the most versatile of all these 7-seat SUVs in the sector. There are now plenty of them, with recent segment arrivals like Skoda's Kodiaq and Volkswagen's Tiguan Allspace joining revitalised versions of Nissan's X-Trail and Kia's Sorento to battle existing players like Hyundai's Santa Fe and Land Rover's Discovery Sport, all contending for the fickle affections of family folk. Peugeot has been in this segment before with the 4007 SUV that it sold between 2007 and 2012. That Mitsubishi Outlander-based model's low-rent cabin and cramped rearmost quarters let it down though, issues that have been thoroughly addressed this time around with a beautifully finished interior and a class-leadingly large boot, the size of which is aided by the fact that, unlike most of its rivals, Peugeot sees no reason to provide conventional versions of this car with 4-wheel drive. Other product attributes include a sporty-feeling i-cockpit driving position and a range of impressively frugal engines. Peugeot hopes that it'll all be enough to set this 5008 apart from the competition. Are they right? Let's find out. A family-sized 7-seat SUV isn't meant to be thrown about, but it should be capable of safe, high-speed handling should circumstances demand that. Now, if you want us to get right to it, that is what's been delivered here. Don't expect to particularly enjoy the back doubles on your way back home from the school run, but if necessary, the 5008 will get you through them surprisingly quickly if your kids have made you late for your first appointment of the day. This is even more of an achievement than it might sound, given that comfort and refinement, quite rightly, have been prioritised over fluid handling in the creation of this car. Helping though in this regard is the light, stiff EMP2 platform this Peugeot's built on, and that's a major contributor to the impressive weight advantage this car enjoys over its competitors. Let's take perhaps the most significant ones, Nissan's X-Trail and Skoda's Kodiaq. A 5008 is around 150 kilos lighter than both these rivals, and that's a weight saving that's probably equivalent to something like the combined weight of your entire family. That explains why it can be more softly sprung than both those two alternative models, yet get close to matching them for the speed at which country road corners can be hustled through. A Kodiaq, for example, is much more firmly set up, and it ought to be considerably more agile, but in this Peugeot there simply isn't the same mass to shift from lock to lock, so this car is lighter on its feet. This whole demeanour is emphasised by a design feature that may initially prove something of a culture shock if you come to this car unfamiliar with recent models from this Gallic brand, the I-cockpit driving position. Now, this setup gives you a tiny steering wheel with a curious flattened top and bottom section, and it asks you to view the instrument binnacle dials above its top rim rather than more conventionally through the spokes. Now, at first this sounds, and in fact it feels, a little bit strange, but it does mean that the wheel can be smaller and also positioned closer to the driver and give a more connected feel that encourages wrist flick direction changes. There are also other differences to set the driving experience of this car apart from its rivals. The absence of conventional speedo and rev counter dials, for example. You get virtual gauges instead on this configurable 12.3-inch instrument binnacle screen. And if you think that's a gimmick, then you certainly won't like the I-cockpit amplify system that's fitted to GT series models and offers a one-touch change to the things you see, sense, smell and feel in the cabin. Two settings, relax and boost, can be preset with different lighting intensities, seat massage options, interior fragrance choices, and your choice of either normal or sport driving modes. From one perspective, it's all a bit silly, but then, if we're honest, a lot of the things that we rather enjoy in life are a little bit like that when all's said and done. And that includes the modern car buyer's continuing preference for wanting a family 5-door of this kind dressed up in a pair of hiking boots. Many early family crossover models following this formula had dull, compromised, and sometimes downright unpleasant drive dynamics compared to the family hatchbacks that they were based on. Adding in the required taller stance meant extra body roll, and that in turn created the need for stiff, overly firm suspension. Now, I've already shared with you the fact that the 5008 isn't like that. In fact, we reckon that for the needs of its target market, this car's suspension setup is one of the best judged in the class, which is just as well because there's no opportunity to change that. The I-cockpit amplify system sport mode is limited to offering firmer throttle response, heavier steering feel, and if you have opted for auto transmission, quicker gear shift timings too. Plus, in this setting, you get a red tinged instrument display, and that brings us all the way back to fashionable frippery. Having focused a lot on that kind of thing so far in this section, we should probably cover some of the more sensible stuff. Engines, for example. As expected, this car shares all its power plants with the shorter, but otherwise very similar 3008 SUV it's based on. So there's a range of Blue HDI diesels and a zesty 1.2 litre 3-cylinder PureTech petrol unit with the company's EAT6 6-speed automatic gearbox, widely available as an option on most models. On the subject of auto transmission, you have to have that if you're one of the tiny proportion of buyers who will opt for the older 1.6 litre THP 165 bhp turbo petrol engine that the brand has rather unnecessarily included further up the lineup. You might also want to ask your dealer about the plug-in petrol-electric hybrid model that Peugeot chose not to include in the initial stages of this model's production run. If you're looking at one of the mainstream variants, then we would recommend that you don't dismiss the entry-level petrol unit out of hand. It's certainly easy to be prejudiced against the use of a little 3-cylinder 1.2 litre petrol engine in a car of this size, but thanks to the relatively light curb weight mentioned earlier, this Peugeot actually copes quite happily in this form, and it would be a good choice for a lower mileage buyer. There's 130 brake horsepower on tap and 62 miles an hour from rest occupies 10.9 seconds en route to 117 miles an hour. Only if you regularly need a significant degree of pulling power, as might be the case if, say, you frequently use all 3 seating rows, might that PureTech power plant disappoint and make one of the various Blue HDI variants a better bet. When it comes to these, size very definitely isn't everything. There's an entry-level 1.6 litre, 100 brake horsepower Blue HDI unit, which makes 13.6 seconds en route to a maximum of 108 miles an hour. And at the other end of the range, there's a 2 litre Blue HDI option that we're trying here, which in 150 bhp, guys, improves those figures to 9.6 seconds and 129 miles an hour. A 180 bhp version of this engine is available, mated to Peugeot's latest generation E88 8-speed automatic gearbox if you want to go faster still. In our view, though, a better choice than both of those is the lineup's most modern power plant, which also happens to be the smallest capacity diesel on offer, a 1.5 litre Blue HDI 130 bhp variant. Now, thanks to a clever combustion chamber design, this engine delivers an extremely desirable have cake and eat it scenario, namely efficiency returns that can virtually match those of the base diesel model and performance figures that are pretty much as good as those of this 2 litre diesel unit. That little 1.5 has a lusty 300 Newton meters of pulling power too. That's 30% more than you get in the petrol unit that we're recommending earlier. And that will come in especially useful if you're heavily laden with people and packages on, say, a long family trip. It's on such a journey that you'll really appreciate the emphasis on ride and refinement that we alluded to earlier. And we have found that if you thrash the diesel engines at lower speeds, they do become a bit noisy, but once you're cruising on the highway at or near the national limit, this is probably the quietest car in the class, and at that kind of velocity, it's adept at soaking up the kind of tarmac tears that you will feel more readily in most rivals. The suspension's not bad in town either, but it can get occasionally caught out more than you'd expect, probably by nastier speed humps and bigger potholes. As for the off-road promise suggested by the SUV styling, well, it isn't completely without foundation, despite the fact that this is the only car in the class which doesn't offer customers the opportunity to specify mainstream models with a 4x4 system. Peugeot thinks that customers in this sector don't need the weight and complexity of all-wheel traction. Instead, the French brand offers 5008 buyers the extra cost option of an advanced grip control system as part of a package that comes not only with special mud and snow tyres, but also a hill assist descent control system to ease you down slippery slopes. The grip control package copies Land Rover's terrain response setup in offering the driver the chance to choose different settings to suit different surfaces. There are 5 separate modes on offer: normal, snow, mud, sand and ESP off. None of this is able to make this car into any kind of mud plugger, but in combination with a useful 236mm of ground clearance, it's all enough to potentially make it a good deal more capable in a snowy snap than most of its rivals. So, what differentiates an SUV like this second generation 5008 model from the MPV it used to be? Well, in essence, the answer lies in the fact that all the hallmarks of the SUV genre are now present, primarily the long horizontal bonnet, the vertical front face and the raised bodyline. The company's smaller 3008 crossover also offers these things, and what's been provided here is basically little more than a version of that car that's been lengthened by 190 mils at the back. Still, there's nothing wrong with that. Both of these Peugeot products are very good looking indeed, with styling showing a class and maturity that's only recently been restored of one of this Gallic maker's most appealing brand virtues. The company is pushing its products up market, and here it really shows. Especially here at the front. As I just mentioned, the upright placement of this wide grille is fundamental in creating this model's SUV feel. Plusher GT series models like this one surround that with a smarter sports bumper. Slashes from that intrude into the finely detailed projector headlamps that feature full LED illumination in top variants like this one. The chrome framed fog lights that lie further down can also feature that technology on request, and these are positioned above large corner air intakes, flanking the grey lower scuff plate that's provided above entry-level trim to emphasise this car's crossover credentials. Move to the side, and as expected, this 5008 looks more distinctively unique, with a far more substantial demeanour than its MPV predecessor. That's an impression that's backed up by the tape measure. There's a significant 110mm increase in length over that previous model. True, that is still not enough to make it as externally large as some competitors in the segment. A rival Skoda Kodiaq, for example, is 56mm longer, but this Peugeot compensates by moving its axles further apart, creating a 2.84-metre wheelbase that's the longest in the class. As with the 3008, you get a long, flat bonnet, and that's edged by these lovely chromed inserts that flow up into the A-pillars from the headlights. You will need a plusher model like this one, though, to get the full intended effect. Little touches like a black painted roof, the larger 19-inch wheels, aluminium roof rails, and extra chrome above the lower side cladding and along the upper window line make a lot of difference. The rear end is of course far squarer and more upright than that of a 3008. It has to be able to accommodate that extra third seating row. Otherwise though, the styling approach is much the same. It features the central gloss black strip and LED claw effect rear lamps that now identify modern Peugeot SUVs. A smart strip of chrome rather impractically decorates the top of the bumper, and that features incorporated tailpipes in this GT series model. Of course, as usual, what's more important is the stuff that you can't see, namely the light and stiff EMP2 platform that's contributed so much to this model's overall running cost efficiency. Time to take a seat inside. One of the things we liked most about the second generation 3008 model was the high quality of its interior, and since the dash in this car is lifted directly from that one, the same positive comments apply. Now, if you didn't know you were in a Peugeot, you might think that this was a model from the PSA Group's DS Premium brand. It's that good. Well, at least it is in an upmarket variant like this one, with its contrast fascia stitching and smart quilted leather seat trim. Even lower down the range though, the cabins provided put those of rivals to shame, with copious amounts of chrome trim and lovely design features like this piano key switchgear. At night, the cabin is bathed in all-round ambient blue lighting, and that looks particularly special. But if that's the first thing you notice, then without doubt the second is the steering wheel and instrument binnacle design. And it's the latest evolution of what Peugeot calls its iCockpit layout. Now, if you have driven any of the brand's more recent smaller models, you'll already be familiar with the basic concept here, and that's that you look at the instruments over the top of the steering wheel rather than viewing them through it, and that the wheel itself is a size smaller than you'll be used to, and that facilitates a wrist flick quality of steering feel that most people prefer once they've experienced it. Now, we've always rather liked this setup, but lots of other commentators haven't, so Peugeot has evolved it here in two ways, one very simple and one very complex. The simple change is so straightforward that you really wonder why it wasn't done in the first place. Both the bottom and the top of the wheel have been flattened so that when you adjust the thing, it's easier to find a position that doesn't either brush your knees or obscure the gauges ahead. Yes, the gauges, well, they represent another of this cabin's defining talking points. Conventional dials have been completely replaced by this fully configurable and customizable 12.3-inch colour screen. 5 different display modes: personal, minimum, dials, driving and navigation, accessed via a roller switch on the left hand side of the steering wheel, prompt intricately animated changes from the state-of-the-art graphics. Visual priority can be given to the speed readouts, the navigation mapping or driving safety features, or you can choose to view only the absolute minimum of information if all that gives you a headache. No other directly comparable model in this segment offers anything similar, and with this Peugeot it is standard across the range. Just about everything else you'll need to know can be found on what looks like a tablet PC attached to the fascia, a multifunction 8-inch colour touchscreen which, like the instrument layout, can display in your choice of 2 colours, blue or copper, and which deals with the usual stereo, phone, navigational and informational functions. It also has a mirror screen feature that, via the MirrorLink or Apple CarPlay systems, allows this monitor to display certain apps from compatible smartphones. We were less pleased to find that this screen is also burdened with the ventilation controls. In our view, things like that, key things, are much better separated out. Still, on the plus side, the menus on this display are easier to access than they are in other PSA Group models, because these beautifully crafted piano-style keys below the centre vents offer instant shortcut options to the monitor's most commonly used functions. Now, one of these shortcut options is a feature that you will either love to death or think is something of a gimmick: the iCockpit amplifier system that's standard on GT line and top GT models like this one. It claims to be able to offer a one-touch change to the things that you see, sense, smell and feel in your travelling environment, and all of this via two settings: relax or boost if you're feeling a bit more dynamic. Now, these two modes can be configured with different cabin lighting intensities, normal or sport driving settings, and also your choice between the three rather pretentiously named interior fragrances that the iCockpit amplifier package provides to waft around the cabin. So these are Harmony Wood, Aerodrive or Cosmic Cure. Now, if your 5008 has the optional driver's seat massaging feature, that is standard actually on the top GT variant, then the 4 different settings that come with that can also be programmed into the amplifier setup. Overall, you know, we rather like it. But there's not much point in having frippery functionality like that if basics like cabin storage haven't been properly dealt with. Before fussing around with fragrances, we'd prefer Peugeot's designers to find a way of engineering right-hand drive models so the majority of space in the glove box wasn't taken up with a fuse box, which has once again happened here. To be fair, that is compensated for by a lot of stowage space elsewhere, most of it in this simply enormous 11-litre air-conditioned box between the seats, with its neat stitched butterfly opening double lid and interior storage tray. In front of this lie 2 large cup holders, plus there's a further tray in front of the gear stick that's intended for your phone, hence the nearby 12-volt and USB ports. On plusher models like this one, this area also incorporates a wireless charging mat. The door bins are also reasonably sized. They include recesses for bottles, and on plusher models they come carpeted to stop loose items from rattling around. As for all-round visibility from the pleasingly high-set driving position, well, that's okay once you've adjusted to the thick front A-pillars that can sometimes get in the way at junctions. Over-the-shoulder vision is better than it is in the smaller 3008 model because of this bigger car's large rear 3/4 windows, and as long as you avoid entry-level trim, additional reversing assistance is provided by the standard fitment of all-round parking sensors and a rear-view camera. Time to take a seat in the middle row. Now, if you're lifting things like child seats in and out, you'll be glad of this model's high roof height and its wide opening doors. Once inside, you'll also appreciate the 165mm that's been added to the wheelbase of the 3008 derived EMP2 platform, something that's freed up very decent cabin length for knees and legs in this part of the car. And that's even before you start using the backwards and forwards sliding mechanism that's incorporated into the 3 individual chairs provided. Now, they recline too, as taller folk might need them to if they happen to be in a plusher variant like this one that's fitted with Peugeot's panoramic glass roof that eats into the headroom a little bit. We would want this feature though, because without it, the combination of tinted glass and the Bodywork's high waistline can make this rear cabin feel smaller than it actually is. Now, that's one reason why you might get inside a lower spec model and think the rear seat of a competitor like Skoda's Kodiaq, for example, or Nissan's X-Trail is bigger. In fact, it's not the case, as you would find if you were to draw what would normally be the short straw of a second row passenger and find yourself seated here here in the middle. In, say, the Kodiaq, someone in this position would be troubled by a prominent centre transmission tunnel, and that's something this Peugeot does without. Plus, the generous width of this cabin means that this 5008 would be the most accommodating model in the segment to choose if you regularly need to install 3 child seats back here. Seat back tray tables, ISOFIX attachments on all 3 seats, narrow door bins, digital temperature controls and side window blinds all complete the family-friendly ambiance. So what's it going to be like in the third row? Well, gaining access to the very rear of the car requires you to pull up a latch on the second row seat shoulder, which then folds the chair out of the way and makes it relatively easy to clamber into the very back. Now back here is where the Peugeot claim we began this film with, that this SUV can offer just as much space and versatility as an MPV, comes under the most scrutiny. It's here that the 5008 benefits from Peugeot's decision not to engineer the EMP2 platform to accept four-wheel drive. Now that's not the case with most crossover rivals in this segment, and as a result cars like rival Skoda Kodiaq and Nissan X-Trail models sit third row occupants much higher and less comfortably. 6-foot folk who would be really cramped in those 2 competitors would be reasonably comfortable here, provided the journey wasn't too long and the middle row occupants didn't have their seats slid too far back. As for that MPV rivaling claim, well, it is reasonably valid if your point of reference is a mid-sized 7-seat people carrier, like, say, a Renault Grand Scenic or a Citroën Grand C4 Picasso. Those are models that don't really offer appreciably more third row room than this. It would only be fair for us to point out too, though, that 5008 money could alternatively buy you a really large MPV, one like a Ford Galaxy, say, or a Volkswagen Charan. And with contenders of that sort, well, space at the very back would be vastly better. Likely buyers of this car though, well, they're probably only really going to need these extra pews for children. That being the case, we don't really understand why the designers haven't fitted out these third row chairs with the ISOFIX child seat fastenings that parents are going to need. To be fair to Peugeot, I suppose most rival brand models make the same mistake. There are small upper storage areas on either side, and for the right-hand passenger here, there's a lowered storage area and there's also a cup holder. So finally, let's take a look in the boot. Now the hatch is easy to lift up, so you don't really need the optional electric tailgate, but we have got it here. This is one of those that you can raise with a wave of your foot beneath the bumper if you approach the car key in pocket and laden down with bags. Once the hatch is raised, well, a huge aperture is revealed, and that's complete with a usefully low loading sill. So even when all 3 seating rows are upright like this, there's still space behind the rearmost seat backs for rather more than a couple of plastic shopping bags, 166 litres to be exact, or 237 litres if you load up to the roofline. That's about the same as you get in the boot of a Super Mini. There is a storage area on the right for smaller items and a useful 12-volt socket high up on the left. Most of the time, of course, 5008 owners are probably going to be using their cars with these rearmost seats folded into the floor, and that's an action that's easy to complete, in which case there's 952 litres of storage space on offer, or up to 1060 litres if you take out the rear seats altogether and store them in your garage. Plus you could free up more space while still retaining second row seating if you push that middle row right forward. If you need to accommodate longer items, the second row seat back is split into thirds, and that'll be welcome, allowing you to push through longer things like skis without disturbing a couple of rear-seated passengers. If you do need additional room and you want to push down the second row seat backs, then you'll release a vast 2,042 litre capacity, or 2,150 litres if you've removed those third row seats. Plus, there's enough load length to swallow something like a kayak. You'll have even more room to play with if you push forward this fold flat front passenger seat, and that's standard providing you avoid entry-level trim. Doing this will allow your 5008 to take items up to 3.2 metres in length, which is nearly half a metre longer than a rival Skoda Kodiaq can manage. So let's get to the pricing, which is pitched mainly in the £25,000 to £35,000 bracket. That's pretty much what you'd expect to pay these days for the kind of larger, mid-sized 7-seat SUV that this 5008 now is. Unlike a lot of its rivals, this model comes solely in 7-seat form. If you only need 5 seats, you'll be directed by your Peugeot dealer to the smaller 3008 SUV this model's based on. That's a crossover that will come with a £2,000 model-for-model saving over this one. That car in turn sits above the Super Mini-based 2008 SUV that the brand would doubtless see as a perfect second family runabout for the 5008 buyer. As with the 3008, the most affordable 5008 variants use Peugeot's impressively efficient 3-cylinder, 1.2-litre PureTech 130 bhp turbo petrol unit. And that might be all you really need if your annual mileage is quite low. Around 60% of customers, though, are expected to want to pay extra for one of the most affordable Blue HDI diesel variants. There's a 1.6-litre Blue HDI 100 unit that's offered at a premium of around £1,000 over the petrol power plant. But we'd be inclined to find a little more for the more modern, pokier and efficient 1.5-litre Blue HDI 130 unit. It'll move this car along quite a lot more energetically. Now, if you want, with these engines, there's the option of Peugeot's E86 automatic gearbox for an extra £1,400. Across the lineup, there is a choice of 4 trim levels: Active, Allure, this GT line option and the top GT version. Above base spec level, Peugeot's offering its older 1.6-litre THP petrol turbo engine mated to auto transmission. That'll be a rare sight on our roads though. Of slightly more interest to buyers will be the larger 2-litre Blue HDI power plant that's offered towards the top of the range at well over the £30,000 mark. GT line buyers get that pokier diesel unit in 150 bhp form with manual transmission. That's what we've got here. Or alternatively, you can really push the boat out and get it with top spec GT trim, 180 bhp and an 8-speed auto gearbox. This 5008 will feature hybrid power during its life cycle, this time using petrol plug-in hybrid technology. So talk to your dealer about that if it's of interest. That high-tech variant is the only one offering any kind of 4x4 system. The rest of the range is built around front-wheel drive. Onto the value proposition those prices represent. Now, we've got to start by saying this car could interest a wide range of family buyers, including those looking at 7-seat, mid-sized and large MPVs that are comparably priced in the £25,000 to £35,000 bracket. So anything from plusher Renault Grand Scenic or Citroën Grand C4 Picasso models to larger Ford Galaxy and Volkswagen Charan segment people carriers, in fact. Peugeot, though, has made it clear that it wants the second-generation version of this car to be seen as an SUV, so it's against equivalent mid-sized 7-seat models in that market sector that we'll be making our comparisons. Start to look carefully at the various segment options in this regard, and this Peugeot's value proposition becomes a lot clearer. If you want a 7-seat model of this sort priced in the £25,000 to £30,000 bracket, there are actually only 4 options. The Mitsubishi Outlander, SsangYong's Rexton, Nissan's X-Trail and Skoda's Kodiaq. Now, you can see why someone might opt for a 5008 against any of those models. The Outlander and the Rexton won't save you very much over this Peugeot, and they cost a lot more to run. The X-Trail isn't as well built or as classy inside. And the Kodiaq, well, that's hobbled by the fact that it can't offer you a diesel engine smaller than 2 litres in size, which means that to get that Czech contender with a black pump fueled power plant, 7 seats and a decent level of spec, well, you'll be paying the best part of £30,000. So much for value brand pricing. Now, perhaps you're wondering why we haven't mentioned the 3 other competitor SUVs that more readily tend to spring to mind when thoughts turn to 7-seat models of this kind. Kia's Sorento, Hyundai Santa Fe and Land Rover's Discovery Sport. Well, it's because in each case, if you match the proposition precisely against what's available in the 5008 model lineup, you'll need a budget of around £35,000 for ownership. There are no petrol engines on offer from these 3 contenders, and in the case of the Kia and the Hyundai 2, there's no efficient 150 PS diesel option either. In all honesty, probably a closer match to this Peugeot can be found in the 7-seat all-space version of Volkswagen's Tiguan. But again, as you might expect, that model sells at a considerable premium over 5008 pricing, despite the fact that it's smaller inside and it's not as well equipped. If, having considered all of that, you conclude it is a 5008 that you really want, then you're going to need to know just how generous Peugeot's been when it comes to the standard spec. So let's take a look at that now. Now, as I mentioned earlier, the trim range kicks off with active spec, and even that includes 17-inch alloy wheels, automatic headlamps with LED daytime illumination, rear parking sensors, and special magic wash windscreen wipers that automatically activate when it rains and which place their washer nozzles on the blades for quicker and more effective cleaning. You also get aluminium roof bars and a space-saver spare wheel. Move inside and you'll find an iCockpit instrument binnacle that's based around a 12.3-inch configurable digital instrument panel. Plus there's an 8-inch colour touchscreen in the centre of the dash that deals with the standard dual-zone climate control, offers Bluetooth and a 6-speaker DAB stereo system, as well as providing a mirror screen media connectivity function. Now this allows you to duplicate your phone handset's display onto the centre dash monitor. The setup supporting the MirrorLink system for Android devices and Apple CarPlay for iPhones. Around half of all 5008 buyers in this country, though, will find the £1,800 premium that Peugeot asks to trade up to mid-range Allure spec. Models of this grade are recognisable by larger 18-inch diamond-cut Detroit alloy wheels, rear privacy glass, a lion grey front scuff plate under the bumper, and satin chrome front door panel recess trim. The key extra interior feature at this level is a 3D connected navigation system, and that comes with TomTom live traffic updates and voice recognition. Plus, there are also useful features like front parking sensors, 180-degree colour reversing camera, power folding mirrors, and a fold-flat front passenger seat. The cabin gets a classy upgrade too, with ambient blue interior lighting, man-made leather upholstery with driver's seat lumbar support, and a dashboard that's trimmed in Brumeo fabric. Plus, there are tray tables and window blinds for rear seat passengers. If you want a sportier and more technical take on 5008 motoring, then the next trim level up, GT line, provides that, and that's what we got here. Now the look at this level is subtly different thanks to the addition of a black contrast roof, black door mirror housings, chrome side window trim, and a sports front bumper that surrounds a smarter checkered style grille. There are full LED self-leveling headlights and LED fog lamps, along with sequential scrolling front indicators, twin exhaust pipes, and Peugeot Lion approach lights that cast the company logo on the ground when you get out at night. Inside, the leather effect seating features contrast stitching, plus there's a wireless smartphone charging plate. Perhaps our favourite feature at this level, though, is iCockpit Amplify, and that's a system that offers two configurable interior options called Boost and Relax. So at the touch of a button, these two settings change the cabin atmosphere via ambient lighting, musical settings, and fragrance diffusers. Quite a lot of kit then, but there's still space on the spec sheet for the top-of-the-line GT variant to add even more. Wheel arch extensions surround larger 19-inch two-tone Boston-style alloy rims with a diamond cut finish, plus you get a panoramic opening glass sunroof and chrome door mirror casings. There's also the Peugeot Open and Go keyless entry and ignition system, and a smart electric tailgate that opens when you waft a foot under the back bumper. Inside, there's classier cabin finishing with a grey oak trim for the dashboard and the door cards, along with lovely double-stitched upholstery in real Napa leather. At the front, the seats are heated, 8-way electrically adjustable, and they also feature a massaging function that can be activated via the settings of the iCockpit Amplify system. So on to extras and options. Now many of the features just referenced on the plusher models can be ordered as individual options further down the range. As you'd expect, navigation, the 5008's 3D connected setup, they can be ordered with base active trim, and across the range things like full LED headlights, the keyless entry system, heated seats, the panoramic glass roof, and the smartphone charging plate will all be popular additions. What else? Well, avoid entry-level trim, and you can also specify the thumping focal premium hi-fi setup we've been trying here. In addition, we would want to look at the advanced grip control system that packages up 3 elements that'll improve your winter traction: special 18-inch wheels with mud and snow tyres, a hill assist descent control system to ease you down slippery slopes, and a traction control dial with 5 modes to suit the terrain you're travelling on. As for aesthetics, well, unless you want your 5008 finished in white solid paint, you're going to have to pay extra for one of the metallic shades. There is also a pearlescent option, and if you haven't gone for one of the GT models, you can add in a black finish for the roof as well. Further exterior personalisation, well, that can be achieved with a range of 17, 18 or 19-inch alloy wheel designs. Inside, Allure and GT line model buyers can add in real leather upholstery if they don't like the man-made hide supplied as standard, and a massage system for the driver too. As for practical touches, well, if you don't order the grip control system, you can have a full-size spare wheel. We would also want to look at the detachable tow bar and the boot restraining net, plus the 230-volt socket you can fit into the rear passenger compartment. That would be useful too. If you struggle with parking, you might want to ask your dealer about the Visio Park 2 360-degree colour camera system, and that can identify spaces and then steer you into them. Finally, there's one further extra that you're not likely to see anywhere else: the e-bike folding electric bicycle. Now this connects into a recharging station in the boot, and it's easy to lift out when you need it. With a full charge, which can be replenished in just an hour, the e-bike has a range of up to 18 miles, and that'll let you continue your journey even where cars aren't allowed. On to safety. Now, as you'd expect, there are all the usual things: twin front, side and curtain airbags, Isofix child seat fastenings, and the usual electronic assistance for braking, traction and stability control. In addition though, you'll want to know about the cutting edge electronic radar driven stuff, and there is plenty of it. Now, all versions of this Peugeot get autonomous braking, the brand's VAEB automatic emergency braking system that detects hazards ahead and which will apply the brakes if the driver doesn't react. There is also a distance alert system that tells you if you're getting too close to the vehicle ahead, and a lane departure warning system too, and that will alert you if you drift out of your lane on the highway. That is just the start though. Avoid entry-level trim, and your 5008 will also come with Peugeot's Connect SOS and Assistance package, and that will automatically alert the emergency services with your exact location if the airbags go off. Another welcome inclusion above entry-level spec is the Safety Pack Plus, and that includes 4 further elements: active lane keeping assist. Now that builds on the lane departure warning system functionality by guiding the car back onto the right course if you drift over the lane markings. Active blind spot detection will alert you if on the move you're just about to dangerously pull out in front of another vehicle. Advanced driver attention alert is even more sensitive than the standard system to driver drowsiness, and smart beam assistance will automatically dip the headlights for you at night. Can you go further? Well, the GT model's standard adaptive cruise control with stop function can be fitted to models further down the range. This setup uses a radar to automatically regulate your cruising distance to the vehicle in front at highway speeds, even to the extent of stopping and then seamlessly starting you off again if necessary. If you go for the detachable tow bar, you'll also get a trailer sway mitigation system to avoid snaking when you're pulling a trailer. If you're a customer in the volume part of the SUV segment, as your family grows, one of the usual disadvantages of switching from a mid-sized 5-seat SUV to a larger mid-sized 7-seat model is a sharp increase in running costs. Now that in turn is due to a sharp increase in weight. Let's explain that with a couple of examples. If you go from a 5-seat Nissan Qashqai or Skoda Karoq to a 7-seat Nissan X-Trail or Skoda Kodiaq, then the weight of the car will rise by around 100 kilos, which is why, even though the bigger model may use exactly the same engine, it'll be around 20% thirstier and dirtier. And that's the same with most other models in the sector. And that seems a pretty harsh penalty to pay just for the convenience of a bit of extra cargo room and the provision of 2 fold-out chairs in the boot, doesn't it? One of the things that's most impressive about Peugeot's modern era mid-sized SUV models is the way the running cost rise from 5 to 7-seat motoring has been so much reduced. Because a 5008 only weighs 60 kilos more than an equivalent 3008, it doesn't need to use very much more fuel or put out emissions that are very much smokier. And because both models use a light and stiff EMP2 platform that gives them a weight advantage over obvious rivals of around 150 kilos, both these Peugeot SUVs are already well placed to trump their rivals when it comes to fuel and CO2 returns. Let's give you some figures to illustrate that point. A base 1.2 litre PureTech 130 petrol 5008 manages 52.3 mpg on the combined cycle and 124 grams per kilometre of CO2. And for comparison, a 3008 with exactly the same engine returns 55.4 mpg and 117 grams per kilometre. So not too much different. Go for the alternative Blue HDI 100 diesel, and the figures for the 5008 are 65.7 mpg and 113 grams per kilometre. Again, not too dissimilar to the readings you get for a 3008 with the same engine. Specify this 5008 7-seater with the 1.5 litre Blue HDI 130 diesel that we'd recommend, and despite the extra power you get, the figures returned are pretty close to those of the older 1.6 litre power plant. Let's give you some class perspective on that. Now, in rough terms, we reckon an equivalently engined rival Skoda Kodiaq or Nissan X-Trail 7-seat model will cost you about 10 to 15% more to run than a comparable 5008. Now, that will probably translate into 4 to 5 fewer miles from every gallon and up to 20 grams per kilometre difference in CO2. And that latter figure is one that might make quite a difference when it comes to benefit-in-kind taxation. Another way that we could put this is that in the form of this 5008, you get a 7-seat SUV of this kind that'll cost you less to run than the 5-seat models on offer from rival brands. And that really does make you think, doesn't it? For completion, let's also cover off the returns of the other engine options available in the 5008 range. If you're one of the few buyers looking at the older tech 1.6 litre THP 4-cylinder petrol power plant, and that comes with 165 bhp, and it can only be mated with auto transmission, the figures are 46.3 mpg and 140 grams per kilometre. It's more likely though that if you are looking further up the lineup, you'll be considering the 2 litre Blue HDI diesel that we're trying here. Now, the version with 150 bhp and manual transmission returns 61.4 mpg and 118 grams per kilometre, while the 180 bhp unit in the top 8-speed Auto GT model manages just under 60 miles per gallon and a fraction under 125 grams per kilometre. Now, Peugeot has also developed a plug-in petrol electric power plant for 5008 buyers, and that'll be able, so the brand claims, to travel up to 31 miles between charges. Of course, running costs are about a lot more than just fuel economy and CO2 readings. So what else are you going to need to know? Well, there is the usual unremarkable 3-year, 60,000 mile warranty and service intervals. They are every 12,500 miles or once a year, whichever comes first. You can budget ahead for the work by taking up Peugeot's service plan. For a fixed monthly fee, you can cover yourself for up to 50,000 miles of motoring over either 3 or 5 years. Residual values, now they're also going to be key to whole life running costs. Independent experts cap predict and retain value after 3 years and 60,000 miles of 43%, which if it's realised would represent a big step forward from the kind of showing that Peugeot SUVs have previously been able to manage. All of this will help Peugeot dealers when it comes to offering competitive leasing rates on this car, and if that's what you're after, then it's likely you'll be offered 2 basic options. Now, the first of these is a straightforward deal where you pay a deposit and a monthly sum just as you would with any other leasing contract, or you could always choose the French brand's popular Just Add Fuel package. Now, that wraps up insurance, servicing and tax into regular payments, so all you have to do is fill up the tank. Having mentioned insurance, we ought to finish by guiding you through the groupings. The 1.2 litre PureTech petrol model sits in groups 11E or 12E, depending on the trim variant that you choose. For the 1.6 litre THP petrol variant, it'll be group 16E or 17E. As for the 1.6 litre Blue HDI diesel, well, the smaller unit with 100 bhp attracts a Group 11E rating, while the 130 bhp 1.5 litre version is expected to attract a rating of about 16E. If, though, you'd prefer the larger 2 litre Blue HDI diesel with 150 bhp, then the premium will be based on a 20E or 21E ranking, depending again on the trim level that you've chosen. The Peugeot 180 bhp GT variant, though, is rated at Group 23E. Peugeot needed to be represented in the family SUV segment with a contender to slot in above their more compact 2008 and 3008 models. This 5008 provides exactly that, a logical step up for buyers who need more space, and one that also offers sophisticated, luxurious packaging that we think many potential buyers will like. The cabin feels a class above anything else you can buy in this segment for the same kind of money. It's that good. We're told by the French brand that this car represents a lifestyle choice, and if that is the case, it needs to be able to change aspects of your motoring lifestyle. The atmosphere you drive in, the way you can use the cabin instruments, the kind of mobility choices you can make at journey's end. Well, sure enough, a 5008 can make a difference in all these areas in a way that no other car in the class can. Of course, it needs to get the basics right too, so it's just as well that this is also one of the most spacious and efficient cars in its segment. Those are attributes aided by the stiff and sophisticated EMP2 platform. Now, it's true the diesel engines can be a little noisy when pushed, and other models in the sector can still handle better on the limit, although to some extent the direct involving feel that's delivered by the clever iCockpit driving position is effective in masking that. You may also be disappointed to find that, unlike its rivals, Peugeot isn't prepared to offer a four-wheel drive option on mainstream models. So, how to sum it all up? Well, this is, like its 3008 stablemate, a very sophisticated kind of mid-sized SUV. It feels special in a way that no other car in this segment does, in a way that's uniquely Peugeot. And that's important, as this car undoubtedly will be for its brand.